Here we go with lesson 9.05 on the lining of the intestines, and we're going to pick up the large intestine in this video. The first thing we want to do is look at a cross section of this would be the small intestine, but most of the alimentary canal, including the esophagus, including the stomach, and small intestine, large intestine, have this same profile of tissues. So the first thing you see here to the outside, and I've color coded this, so if you want to do your color coding, pause the video here. Okay, it says serosa, S-E-R-O-S-A. This is a membrane. So this is actually a membrane that surrounds the intestine and it kind of holds everything together, kind of like there's a periosteum or other membranes we've seen. Then we go, it says muscularis, and this has intercircular and outer longitudinal. Well, we saw that with the stomach has a third layer, the oblique. Most of the intestines have two. They have a circular and a longitudinal. Hopefully you can just read that. Then we go with the submucosa. This is a connective tissue. And then the mucosa, this is a lumen here. So this is going to be epithelial, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit. You should already remember what epithelial tissue lines the intestines. So hopefully over here we see a blow up of that. And hopefully you recognize that this is a simple columnar. But let's kind of zoom out and look at the big picture. So what they've done here, this is a section and this is another view. So here you have your muscle layers. And then they're showing the lumen, and this is going to be your epithelial. So the first thing I want you to notice is that there are large circular folds. So the surface of the small intestine has folds. And I'm going to just kind of try to color a couple of those in orange. So you see them here. So that's a fold, that's a fold, that's a fold. It goes all the way back. So we have these large folds. What they've done then is they've taken an area on the fold here, this little tiny piece of one fold, and they've expanded it. And what you can see is these finger-like projections. Each one of these projections is called a villi. V-I-L-L-I, I believe. So these are the smaller folds on the, what do we call these large circular folds? And notice the blood supply. There is so much blood supply here. Every one of these villi have their own artery and have their own venule or arteriole and their own, actually these are probably capillaries. Yep, oh, there it is, capillaries. Say an arteriole would be too big. So they're showing 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the fifth one in its cross section. And then what they did was they took a small section of this and they blew this up so that we can see a single cell. And here's that simple columnar. And notice what I have on the top. Microvilli. So I have folds on top of my folds on top of my folds. Your intestines are folded 3 times. And that's not like saying times 3. That's like third power. Think about, 10 times 10 times 10. Now take 10 to the third power. It's a much bigger number. Why is it so folded? Well, remember what the whole function of your small intestine, especially for your small intestine, is about nutrient absorption. Well, what's nutrient absorption dependent on? It depends on surface area. The nutrients have to be in contact with a surface to be absorbed. So as your foodstuffs are passing over and washing over these villi, And then the microvilli, with this great blood supply here, we can absorb all the nutrients that we need from our diet. So absorption depends on surface area. So hence all the folds. Without it, we would not be able to absorb the nutrients we need, and we would be in trouble. All right, so that does it for the lining. Let's go ahead and jump up now to the large intestine. And we're basically, for this, just going to talk about the main functions and the regions. So starting off, this is going to be my ileum. This is going to be the ileocecal valve. And then we break down the large intestine into three main portions. So we call it the colon. A lot of times it's called the colon. So in yellow, I have the ascending colon. As I go across the body, I have the transverse colon. I have the descending colon. This area of the colon, it looks a little bit like an S, so this is called the sigmoid colon. In orange, I have the rectum. And in red, I have the anus. And then over here in green, I have the appendix. This area down here, it's almost kind of a blind pouch, or it's like it can be kind of a dead end pouch. It's called the cecum. And the only reason we need to know that is that's why this is called the ileocecal valve. So we get the leftovers that leave the ileum, and they enter into the cecum and the ascending colon. They travel up, they come across, down. And as we go, what we're doing, by the time we reach here, we have feces. So our function is to reabsorb as much water as possible. And we have some vitamins that are absorbed. That's the function. If you are sick or you have a bacteria and your body wants to get rid of it, what it'll do is everything moves. It's not just in the esophagus that substances move via peristalsis. Everything that moves through the alimentary canal, and this is still the alimentary canal, moves via peristalsis. So what'll happen is your body will speed up peristalsis and your substances will rush through this. And so by the time they get to the end, they haven't dried out. The water hasn't been reabsorbed. That's why diarrhea is runny. It's still got all that water in it. We have multiple sphincters down here in the anus. One's voluntary, one's involuntary. So the voluntary allows us to control it. It takes training, though. That's what we do when we potty train. The involuntary triggers first, and that's what triggers the sensation, and then you can the voluntary. Let's talk a little bit about the appendix. It's kind of a weird organ. It's only found in humans, apes, and wombats, and they used to think it had no function at all, but now they believe it does have limited immune function. It has some tonsillar tissue in it, so they think that it can be used to help fight off infections. Now, if it gets, but if it becomes infected, it can burst. And that's a problem because it's going to spread all of that infected material all over your internal intestines, and you can become so sick that that infection will spread and it can kill you. Of course, we call this appendicitis. So one of the disorders we're going to talk about here is appendicitis, and that's when you have an inflamed appendix, and it has to be removed. So the other one is diverticulitis. Diverticulitis. You guys know itis is inflammation, so diverticulitis is inflammation of the diverticuli. Diverticuli are small pouches in the colon, in the descending and sigmoid colon. And what can happen is you can get substances trapped. So if you get a seed, if you get a substance trapped in these pouches, in pouches kind of, it can get infected. And if it gets infected, then it's not only extremely painful, it can, if the infection keeps going, it can come all the way out to the outside and ulcerate and get out into your internal organs. Again, that's a problem. Another one that I want to mention briefly is colon cancer. So we're actually going to do, this is number 3. This was number 1, number 2. Colon cancer is cancer, and it's usually here in the sigmoid and descending colon. And so what they will do for that is they will do a colonoscopy. So they'll test for that doing a colonoscopy, where they take, they'll have you do a colon cleanse, and you'll get all the substances out, and then they'll put a camera up and they'll look to see if there's any unusual cells in the form of polyps. So you'll see this polyp, and it could be precancerous or it could be cancerous. But the reason I wanted to mention this one is colon cancer is becoming more prevalent in people in their 40s. It used to be you really didn't see colon cancer until someone was in their 50s or 60s. I had a friend who was 42 and just underwent treatment for colon cancer. He has a good outlook, but really shocking that he got it so young. The actor who played Black Panther, I forget his name, but he died of colon cancer. He had it, and then again, he got it in his late 30s, early 40s. So scientists don't know why, but that is definitely the trend. So here's what we covered. We went over the parts of the large intestine: the ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid, rectum, and anus. Went over 3 disorders. And then we also talked about the epithelial lining of the small intestine and how all of the folding fits with what we're doing in the small intestine. And also make sure you know the tissue layers. All right, we are done with the small intestine.